Okay, everyone, let's start. Oh, come on here. Today we will be on civilization. And I call it Civilization 1B because I suppose I will be talking at least another time on civilization. I don't think we will finish talking about it today. So let's see how it goes. So what is civilization? There are here two different definitions. The first one is the stage of human social and cultural development and organization that is considered most advanced. What do you mean?
Can I straight away say something here?
Yeah, let's take this one so that the people there also can hear you. Talk to the mic.
When I see this definition, I have lived with it. I come from an old civilization, so I understand it, and I can see all the things that we can tick the boxes. But then, if we look at Aboriginal civilization, it's a civilization, and I'm becoming more conscious of it now.
Yeah.
As a migrant who has come to this country, and recently I'm hearing so much about it. Recently, there was a book called Dark or something, and there's a lot of controversy about that as well. So I'm just saying, no, that's a great civilization, but that doesn't tick these boxes.
Yeah, so the first one is, I think, is very weak because when you say advanced, is the definition was to what do you mean by advanced?
No, but I'm looking at
the second one is
I'm looking at the second point because I don't think they had urban development. I don't know whether they're a form of government. Somebody can. You are Australian born, so perhaps you can help me here. And there were small groups of people, I think, small groups running around the place, hunter-gatherers. So, but they're a civilization.
Yeah.
But they may not meet this criteria.
Yeah. So, yeah, just leave it there, and then we probably can pass it along when somebody want to comment on it. So the second definition is a complex society characterized by urban development. So I agree with you. You said must have an urban. Can we have a civilization which doesn't have urban in the sense that we understand it? For example, we don't have a city. And then social stratifications, that means there are ruling class, etc. Is that always necessary? A form of government follows with the social stratification, and then a symbolic system of communication, such as writing. So these are some of the so-called definitions. For me, I will say a civilization is a large number of people agree to live under the same norm together. And of course, it depends on how large you mean large, okay? Even a family of 3 or 4, we live in the same norm. We agree on something together in order to live together. But as this number of participants in the common norm grows larger and larger, I think that becomes a civilization. But at what point we say this is a civilization is up to you. I basically would say today, if it is not at the level of thousands of people, we probably don't want to call it a civilization. Is that right? Maybe even we will go into the tens of thousands before we call that a civilization. But so the civilization here involves several different concepts. Different people define differently, and there's also an implicit value judgment. Say we are civilized, as is we are better than somebody else. It's not necessarily the case. Is that the case? So my next slide is asking this question: advanced? What do you mean by advanced? Historically, a civilization can be understood as a larger and more advanced culture in implied contrast to smaller, supposedly primitive culture. That's where I started to disagree with the definition. What do you mean by primitive? Some of the people, for example, our Aborigines here, they understand the land so well, much better than most of us understand the land. So how can you call them primitive? Yeah, exactly. Now, we don't need 1,000. We probably need a few hundred, 100 years, and then they will say, hey, not civilized. Even maybe just a generation, 20, 30 years later, they will think we are not civilized.
And another thing, the aboriginal people are cut off from the rest of humanity.
Yeah.
Ice Age. So normally there's interactions and you grow together, but they were cut off.
Yeah, I think cutting off is another interesting thing. Now, we now consider connecting together almost trivial. But just imagine 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we are all cut off. Only even for the people arriving here in the first fleet, for example, when they came here, the chances of they going back is almost zero. Of course, except the sailors, etc. Most of the people arriving here in the first batch, they came here and that's it. So we isolated, but today is different. We are so connected. Even, for example, I have families in America, in Hong Kong, and we can talk every week on YouTube. My classmates, my USD classmates, almost talk every month on Skype. We are all connected. So it's quite interesting about the connectivity here. In this broad sense, a civilization contrasts with non-centralized tribal societies, including cultures of nomadic pastoralists, Neolithic societies or hunter-gatherers. However, sometimes it also contrasts with cultures found within civilizations themselves. So again, people is not exactly the same everybody. So within a large civilization, a large group of people, there are subgroups. There are different subgroups. For example, in China, we have so-called the minority ethnic groups. In China, they are called minority, but if you isolate them to get out, for example, in Xinjiang, we have about 3 million people of Uyghurs. So put that 3 million people in any city, they are a major culture. But within a larger culture, in the Chinese culture, they are minor. So it's very difficult to say which is which. Civilization also organized densely populated settlements divided into heretical social classes with a ruling elite and subordinate urban and rural populations, which engage in intensive agriculture, mining, small-scale manufacturing and trade. Civilization concentrates power and extends human control over the rest of nature, including over other human beings. At the moment, it seems that humans are controlling the nature as well. But is that good for us? We don't know. Maybe we probably are killing ourselves. Yeah. So in terms of that civilization itself, whether it implies better, is something I want to start questioning. So let's go back to some history. It goes all the way back about 100 years ago. This guy, Albert Schweitzer, Schweitzer outlines 2 opinions. One purely material and the other material and ethical. He said that the world crisis was from humanity losing the ethical idea of civilization, the sum total of all progress made by man in every sphere of action and from every point of view is so far as the progress helps towards the spiritual perfecting of individuals as the progress of all progress. Is that true? Ethically, I think some of our progresses is actually the other way around.
I think it's because of power.
Power is corrupt. Yeah. But later on, I probably want. Now, I have been talking about the Chinese political system in China today. I don't know whether you would like me to bring a condensed version over here, because it will be useful to compare at least what I understand as the Chinese philosophy of governing versus the philosophy of governing in the democracy, in the ideas that we are living today. So I want to contrast these two, but probably I will bring that. But in China today, I will go into much details. I was talking about from Chinese concept of utopia to the Plato's idea of democracy. And today I'm going to talk about the political structure in China. And then next week I will come back and compare the Chinese philosophy of ruling, at least the current Chinese Communist Party, versus what we understand as our Western government's kind of rule, how they are different. Maybe I bring a summary of that into this class as well. So it's for those attending the China Today, get a longer version, so to speak.
You know, I lived in Singapore for a couple of years, and I was fascinated to listen to Lee Kuan Yew. I mean, he was never politically correct.
Yes.
He said what he had to say.
Yep.
And on a few occasions, he contrasted the difference between Chinese and Indians. Just fascinating. He once said, I leave metaphysics to the Indians, right? And then he said, when I want one prima donna to lead something, I'll pick an Indian. When I want a group of people to work together, I'll pick Chinese. Because if I pick a group of Indians, they will get together, form a union, and start fighting. You know, at the end of the day, there's some truth in what he said.
Okay.
There's some truth. And you know, there are some races that collectively they achieve a lot. Other races individually they do a lot.
Yeah.
But collectively they are not as coherent.
That I was looked on the TV is about the World War, Second World War in Singapore, how the Indians was fighting with the Japanese, and at the end of the war, I think they went back to India, is it, to fight for independence.
Possibly.
This group, yes, that's what it happened.
Yeah.
For the Indians, yes, the Chinese is different.
Yeah.
But it's also true that many Indian people adopted Chinese children in Singapore after the war, orphans as well. And they brought up them as Indians.
Yeah.
The fact was that fundamentally there are so many differences between the races that you know make them different.
That I think.
And Lee Kuan Yew also said one other thing. He said, look at societies that have got the Confucius sort of ways. China, Japan, South Korea, they are much wealthier than the countries that have had more Indian influence, like Thailand, Indonesia. They are softer. He said they are softer cultures, and compared to the more rigorous. This is what he said.
Well, interesting observation.
It's his observation, not mine.
Yeah,
it's not politically correct to say these things.
Yeah,
but he said it.
Yeah. Okay. What I've been saying here is that there's a.
He has never been buried, because if he is buried, his enemy will dig him out.
But I must say, I don't like him, but I respect him a lot.
Yes.
Because he brought Singapore from absolute poverty to a first world country. I mean, to be fair.
But he makes so many enemies.
Yeah, because of what he says.
He doesn't even dare to be buried.
Because of what he says. But he was right, because he said, you be a politician, not to be popular. You have to do the right thing. And for his time, he did the right thing.
He is a dictator. can't do anything.
But you know something? His method will never work in India. Never work in India.
Because our country is so small.
Not only that, it's not only that, it's a Confucius principles and the principles of the world.
Yeah, the main difference, I think, is culture. We are all the same species, okay? So what is the difference is our cultural brought up, how we are brought up within that culture or civilization. And so another issue I want to look at is why Confucius influenced societies have a different kind of cooperation among people versus the rest of the world. Now, I frankly haven't studied India, so probably I should. So I will do a bit of study about Indian culture and then brought that into that narratives as well, because the narrative is very interesting.
It's interesting, but I also have a look at America and India, very different countries.
Yeah.
Very similar in the way they look at things. Very independent, don't want to follow, you want me to wear a mask? I'm not going to wear a mask.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it. You want me to vaccinate? No.
No.
So many say, no, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah. So I think there's the cultural difference.
Yeah.
And that's where this civilization idea also come up. So I think so far the information I get here is mostly from Wikipedia.
Yeah.
So I'm not exactly endorsing it, but I'm using it as a method of discussion. So let's move on. The next one is Adam Ferguson on an essay which is stated even further back. Not only the individual's advances from infancy to manhood, but the species itself from rootless to civilization. Again, I don't know whether it's true or not, because look at what the amount of weapons humans has invented. It is killing more and more people. So it's much more brutal in a sense. We have atomic bombs, we have hydrogen bombs. The method of killing people among ourselves is so whether we as a species we advance, we don't know. But in terms of material, yes, we do. In terms of medicine, we do. In terms of ordinary people's ordinary life, we do advance quite a bit. But we have to take into account is that we are also causing a lot of hardship in some other weaker countries. In the late 700s and early 1800s, during the French Revolution, civilization was used as a singular, never in plural, and meant the progress of humanity as a whole. Again, the idea of progress here is still the case in French. The use of civilizations as a countable noun was in occasion used in the 19th century, but has become much more common in later 20th century, sometimes just meaning culture itself in origin in an uncountable noun, made countable in the context of ethnography. So we are now starting to realize that it is not a single culture, not a single civilization. We have different variations of the way we organize ourselves. I would call it how we organize ourselves, because obviously when we are living together, we need to cooperate with other people. As our normal interactions is always a very small group of people, the people you work with. But as our needs increase, we are working with more and more people. But that working with more and more people sometimes become much more indirect. For example, this computer. I bought it, I need it, right? It is made up by somebody else. So it is cooperation with me and somebody who make this one. But this cooperation is indirect. It is, I don't know who built this one, but I somehow get this one. which helps me to do something I like to do. And obviously, in return, the one who built this one also gets something. And therefore, this is a cooperation. But this cooperation is now becoming much more indirect. So in a civilization, I think there are more and more methods of cooperating together with larger and larger group of people. And at the moment, globalization means the whole humanity should be able to work together rather than just one country. For example, here I'm getting this one, probably it's made a design in America, made in China, and I bought it in Australia using software written by somebody else somewhere, and all kinds of technology like internet, etc. So we are getting a much larger cooperation ability to cooperate with larger groups of people.
But the reality is that globalization has helped only very few countries in practice. Well, not most of the world. And that is why one of the reasons why Trump emerged in America.
Yeah, but I think everything had both sides. Globalizations, in one way, make some people more desperate. But in other ways, make other people better off. So where's the balance? How can we balance that off is a very ethical questions we should be asking. Globalization enables humans to work together in a much larger scale. But again, this cooperation, do we disadvantage some other groups? Is there a method of avoiding these disadvantages to some specific groups? What's wrong with us in terms of organizing everything? Is there a way to escape some of these drawbacks, or at least improve method of overcoming these drawbacks? I think we will be looking at this later on, probably Civilization 2. Yet another one, I forgot who this is. Okay, this is Jacques Rossi, whatever, I can't pronounce his name. So not always seen as an improvement. Okay, now started people have a knowledge. Okay, we are getting larger group, not necessarily better. Civilization being more rational and socially driven is not fully in accord with human nature, and human wholeness is achievable only through the recovery of or approximation to an original discursive and pre-rational nature unity, whatever that means. Okay, so I think he thinks that human nature basically is good. It is something else that we drive our good nature away. So there's another big philosophical argument: is human nature fundamentally good or fundamentally bad? But I think human nature is fundamentally good. Otherwise, we won't be a successful species. We are not physically strong. We are not physically fast. Our physical ability is quite limited. But we are one of the most successful species. Because we have brain. But whether we become the most successful species, we don't know. For example, the dinosaurs existed for hundreds of million years. For us, we have only a couple of, at most 2 million or 3 million.
No, I reckon, according to Harari, the reason that humans are so successful compared to other animals and so on is because we organize ourselves better. And also we have speech, isn't it?
We have speech, we have method of communication.
We can organize ourselves.
Yeah, now, our communication today is much more, goes beyond of immediate distance and time as well. We can see what happened in the past. So that is one of the major. Again, from Harari's point of view, there's another interesting thing is we have created a virtual concept, virtual organization to organize ourselves without money. Money is a virtual idea. What that piece of paper or that number in your bank is nothing. But we all believe that number will give us.
Harari said that because he said in the 17th, 18th century, China and India together controlled 80% of the world's economy, GDP.
Yeah.
But they didn't progress further because they didn't have credit. They didn't have the concept of credit. And in the West, they developed this concept of credit. And that's how it took off.
Yeah. So there are some. So now, by now, we are globalized. We understand the concept of credit. So the competition now is shifting. Yeah. And then I think this century is Asian century. So I think Australia should treat ourselves as Asian.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether it's going to be Asian century. I'm not sure. Because I will tell you something about America. There's no country as creative as America. It's pretty obvious. Pardon? No, there is no country as creative as America. A lot of the creativity is because America has attracted some of the best brains from the world, from various parts of the world.
Yeah.
The best. Look at the people running American companies. They're from overseas.
Yeah.
They're the best brains. Look at Silicon Valley. They're a very creative society, and I believe that they will get out of this. They've got a bit of political crap going on, but they'll get out of it. I won't count America out. I will never count America out. And in a way, I could be wrong here, and we are going to talk about this in China today. China may have shown its cards too soon. They may have shown their cards too soon. And that's what the critic in the age is talking about. So I'm not sure. Well, you may be right.
Yeah, sure. The conundrum, the paradox of the Chinese-US competition at the moment is that we are at a watershed period. We don't know which way to go. And I call this watershed 2020, last year. Last year is really the watershed. So we don't know whether it will cross over or fall back on the other direction. But I think 2020 is a watershed year. Look at the handling of the pandemic. That is a clear-cut winner for Chinese to overcome the pandemic.
I think they advanced very fast in China. They advanced so fast.
Very true. Very
yes.
True. And
the time I went before and when I went there now, I sit in the bullet train.
Yeah.
That's it.
Before I retired, my Chinese colleagues from China told me if they don't go back home every 6 months, they might be lost.
I know. And the supermarket.
Yeah.
Oh my God, they have everything.
Yeah.
Much better than here.
Yeah, but I will tell you something. Don't call it the Asian century. Call it the Chinese century, because I will tell you, the Sri Lankan, close airline, ethnically Indian. India can never reach that greatness. They've got too many problems. They've got too many problems.
Yes.
There's too much of division and their class system and their caste system and so on.
But
they don't have uniformity,
But the ASEAN countries.
Yeah, ASEAN countries.
The ASEAN countries growing very fast as well.
India's growing as well.
Yeah, growing. Yeah, no, yes.
But the fact is that each region has its own culture, own language, own script, own everything.
Yeah.
There are different countries that have come together.
Yeah.
I mean, India is trying very hard. Look at New Delhi. When I went there, we're still building the monorail, and it's really a lot of slum. Even in New Delhi.
That is because I'm telling you, because of the religion and so on.
I know. It can't catch up with China.
They'll never catch up.
And China is going so fast. That's too fast.
And something else. They don't want to catch up with China because they know their people are like that. Their people are very independent people. They will not.
They take their own pace.
They will go.
Yeah, but they have the second of the same amount of population.
almost the same. Yeah.
Too many.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, I'm going to talk about this at my current affairs class this afternoon. Look at the birth rates. India's birth rate is down. Even though they have so many poor, their birth rate is 2.18. China is much lower, 1.78. They are not even replacing the people.
But they are asking for 3 kids.
Yeah. So India's population is down. Pakistan is bad, 5.14 something, really good. India's birth rate, even with the
Pakistan is maybe because it's Muslim.
yeah, perhaps.
Terrible.
And India also has Muslims, so that's the thing. But the thing is, India is growing. India is going to be the second or third biggest economy in the world, no doubt. But they will never achieve as much as China because of their type of society.
The society is totally different. It's a different.
Different cultures.
Yeah,
You
and
go from north to south, it's like a different world.
even within India, there are so many different languages, different cultures within cultures.
Different script.
Yeah.
I'm not just talking.
Yeah.
You can't. You can't.
Yeah, so it's a different ball game.
Yeah.
So Indian play their own ball games.
They play their own game. They're not bothered.
Yeah, don't worry about importing or exporting ideologies. That's something we should have learned by now. Importing or exporting ideologies doesn't work. It have to depend on the own culture development. China is like that. It has imported in the 1911 when Republic of China is formed. It imported democracy, and then it's now retract to Taiwan, just an island. And then they imported communism, and now they call it socialism with Chinese characteristics.
Chinese are not practicing communism.
Yes, exactly.
But in my mind, they are still communists. It's the way the government is set up.
Yeah.
Still communist.
The people,
No matter what they say.
the Chinese people are not communists. They are
No,
very capitalistic
yes,
people. They're
yes.
very capitalistic.
Yeah,
But
the government used the communist hierarchy to run. So they imported some of the methods from capitalism, from Western politics, like elections. Chinese has elections.
But it's different.
It's different. Yeah, it's a different kind of election.
But I will tell you what. I don't want to run India down very badly myself. They have actually brought 300 million people out of poverty in 25 years. But if it was China, they
They
have brought the whole.
improve the middle class.
Huh?
They improve.
No. The middle class is well off. Don't talk. They have got 300-400 million middle class better off than Chinese. But they have got a lot of poor. But out of the poor, they have brought people up.
Yeah.
They haven't brought out to the rate of China. China has brought everybody up.
Yeah.
That's the difference. They can't because the Indian society can't.
It will take much longer for Indian to take everybody, and probably never.
Never.
So it's a cultural difference. We can't force them to do it.
And we have to admit it. You can't just camouflage.
No. Why doesn't Indian government, like as an example, say, okay, this will be the national language at schools, that's what they have to learn at the end. New generation.
People they're stuffing. It's a democracy. They're telling you to stuff you. They won't do it.
Okay, you have a poster. What language do you want?
Hindi.
Tamil. That's a big.
Hindi is the official language of India.
Well, that's it then. That's
Yeah,
fine.
but when you go to Tamil Nadu, they will never speak to Hindi. They say ours is the oldest language in the world.
Yeah.
They're not interested. You speak English, not Hindi.
It
I mean,
will
in the
take a
south,
generation
you
or
have
two or
Hindi
three,
and
but
Tamil.
surely.
That's a
They
big
may
thing.
get there, but because it's the mindset of the people. I've studied this.
I get that, but something, yeah, I gotta do something, otherwise, what's the point?
No, but people are improving there. I'm telling you, it's improving. There are a lot of people out of poverty and so on. But the people are not willing to accept. They're not willing to accept certain things.
I think it would happen, like, not just the whole world, it might take 1,000 years, but one day it'll be one race, one language, one name system.
Oh no, I don't think that will happen.
It will, it'll take, it might take 2,000 years.
Yeah, maybe, but I don't think that will happen.
It will happen. It has to.
Now,
You know why? Because people now intermarry into
Yep.
nations, and it's
Yeah.
Not everybody. Not everybody.
No, not everybody, but it's started. It has started.
But I know I'm Sri Lankan. I know in 2 generations, there will be a single close Sri Lankan in Australia. Because they are intermarrying at a regular rate.
That's a start.
With diverse accents, right? Because my two children have done that. But the Greeks have been here for about 50, 60 years, so the Italians, I don't think they have been there. So I don't know whether it applies to a lot of people.
We have. It's not
You're Italian. Yeah, but Italians have,
My kids.
your kids have.
They're married. One's married Italian, one's married Australian, one's married or partners half Indian, half Australian. It's slowly happening.
Yes.
That's the hope for the future. That's the hope for the future. But I'm with,
It'll take long.
but it will take a long. But I don't know whether it will happen around the world. I don't know whether that will happen around the world.
The other thing is religion. I mean, sorry, but once you get rid of religions, which again, one day will happen, then we're all we're fine. Until that happens, we're stuck. So anyway, let's keep going. Sorry, just my opinion.
No, good. I think everybody has their own opinion. I think that is the strength of discussion. We really appreciate everybody sharing our ideas. So I don't think it will be possible for us to convince anybody here that my view is better than yours, and nobody can do that within a few.
But his point, these are the very valid point.
Yeah, he has.
Religion,
Yeah.
certain religions will preclude them from mixing in.
Most of the world's problems are because of religion.
Some religions will preclude you from mixing anyway. Because the religious thing.
Well, I knew when I was, I knew I had to marry an Italian, I had to marry a Catholic. That's the term that I did. But my kids,
Yeah, that's different.
whatever you like, as long as they're not a good person, whatever. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think people now is much more liberal.
Yeah.
And look at the Chinese diaspora around the rest of the world. Chinatown will freeze in the age of that first group of Chinese arriving there. So, for example, in our Melbourne Chinatown is very much freeze about 100 years ago Chinese characters. So in some region in, for example, New York Chinatown, it is almost like 115 years ago Chinese. So they come out from China, arrive there, and then establish a little enclave of people, and that people keep on repeating their culture, which they bring out. And then on the other hand, China culture actually slowly changing, and the diaspora is much more stable, keeping the old traditions alive. And so some of us starting to look at different diaspora in different countries to study some of the cultures back then, because it seems that they are better preserved the old culture. I don't know whether that is true in other diaspora.
I think it is in Greek,
In,
I was about to say, I was about to say.
Greek, the Jewish
Yeah.
people. I think they keep their old ways.
Yeah.
And don't realise that their own country has changed.
has changed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the diasporas is rather have freezed the culture that they bring out, and then they keep on there. So it's very interesting.
Yeah.
That means, but again, we also realize that our kids are marrying
yeah, that's right.
and mixing.
My heritage is Italian, but I see myself as Australian. Like I was born here, but I was caught up in my parents wanted to be Italian, my friends wanted to be, I was caught up in all that sort of rubbish. Yeah. I got through it. It was tough, but
And I'll tell you something, this may not be a fashionable statement to make, but multiculturalism has brought on some negativity attached to it as well, because you have to somehow make people Australian, at the end of the day, whatever the culture you come from. See, Americans have done this well, because whatever culture you come from, you're an American.
yeah, they're very patriotic.
They are very American. Doesn't matter where they came from, they're American.
Who's from Texas?
No, but doesn't matter what you think, whether it's Italian or Greek or Chinese or whatever they want.
Here we're not, I don't think they're very patriotic. We're really.
Yeah, but again, having said that, look at the center of the enclaves, like the Chinatown. Those people who live, there are people who live in Chinatown without living in Chinatown forever. But of course, there are people from Chinatown living their little enclave and fully integrated into the outer world. But there is also nucleus, small enclaves, which keep its cultures frozen to the time. So I think just like here, for example, is that Lygon Street?
Yeah.
They keep a very Italian culture there alive. I don't know whether that Italian culture is the current Italian culture or the Italian culture about 50 years ago, 100 years ago, when these people started.
I think it's
Yeah.
moved on. But who did you barrack for yesterday?
Sorry?
Who did you barrack for yesterday? Yeah, there you go.
It's a very interesting thing.
Yeah, so but this guy is an Australian. He got a number of very revolutionary ideas. So the role of revolutionary technology and economic developments in human society, he looked at it in a different way. He proposed the idea of cultural historical approach to archaeology, coming to be seen as one of its founders and chief exponents. Cultural historical archaeology revolves around the concept of culture, which has adopted methodology, and is a major turning point in terms of the history of the discipline. Because traditionally, archaeologists have been looking at the past from a temporal perspective, but now he added the spatial perspective, looking at archaeological sites and see how these archaeological sites interact with nearby archaeological sites, and looking at whether there are cultural exchange. So he brings in a very interesting dimension to the whole archaeology. His idea is that a culture is a set of regularly associated trails. In the material culture, for example, different ornaments, the pots, the burial site, house, etc., that recur across a given area. He said that in this respect, a culture was the archaeological equivalent of a people. He used the term as non-racial. He considered people to be a social grouping, not a biological race. So people group, just a group of people, they live under the same norm. So it doesn't matter whether it is black, white, yellow, or whatever. A group of people willing, but of course, back in those times, people don't travel a long distance, so probably will be much more closer biologically. But in terms of that, he doesn't really emphasize that point. So we talk about the Neolithic revolution, in which people changed from hunter-gatherers into farmers. So this is a radical change in which we change from hunter-gatherer into planting, into farming. Farming changed a lot, changed our human way of life quite significantly.
Albert, didn't Harari say that going from hunter-gatherer to farming was the worst thing that happened to humans?
Oh, not only have I, what's the, is that called Neil Diamond? No, another guy, is that Diamonds? In the book, Civilization, also talk about that. He said, agricultural revolution is the worst thing human ever do.
Yeah.
In terms of our life expectancy, in terms of our health, in terms of our physical size, it's actually strength. So in terms
and class system.
And the class system, and
class system.
Yeah, and one of the words I remember is people started to learn to kneel because of the agricultural revolution. So submission, I don't think the hunter-gatherers, there is such a submission as compared with Neolithic revolution. You will see the emperors sitting right up there, and everybody kneel and cow down, etc. So have the hierarchy. So in terms of there's a very controversial idea is how we organize ourselves into such a large group. Our group is getting larger and larger. At the moment, the two largest group is Indian as one large group. Another is the Chinese and one large group. These two large group people are organizing themselves very differently. Indian follow what they usually call as democracy way of governing, and Chinese follow a authoritarian way of governing or whatever.
In India is democracy. They got a free press. They got free judiciary.
Yeah, whatever that means. Okay, but we can't call it an experiment because they are not under the same condition. But we had two very large group of people are trying to organize themselves in order to work together as a unit. And then when we compare them, it is very difficult to say, oh, which is better than which one, because they have cultural backgrounds. The other will say, hey, I just don't like your style of work. I don't like your style of living. I enjoy my style of living. So why force your ideology onto ourselves? I think that is now coming out quite strong, because remember the Americans used to promote democracy, freedom, etc. to the rest of the world. Now we are seeing a pushback almost. No. We are satisfied with our way of life. Thank you. Don't export your ideology to me.
I'm going to make a statement which is, I hope it's not considered a political statement, but if you look at the world today, the best run countries, the best system are in Scandinavia.
Yeah.
Democracy, but they have a social type of democracy where the government looks out for the people. And
yeah.
Politicians are there. There are politicians that is exceptional.
Yeah.
They are not paid much money. They have to do their own work. They actually showed Angela Merkel, and Germany is like that.
Yeah.
They showed Angela Merkel in the supermarket carrying her own bags.
Yeah. For example, I think in terms of education, Finland got the best education system. Yeah. Yeah, the population is much smaller. Yeah. Yeah.
Is their taxation high?
No, their taxation is very high. The people have high taxation.
Yeah.
But the people are looked after.
Yeah.
The mothers are looked after. They can stay at home with their children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
they are religious. They are not religious, but they are not extremists at all. They are very moderate, and maybe some of them are not religious at all, but they are. Even their prison system is very enlightened. I've read about their prison system. You're right, they're small, but still I'm thinking, admire them when they can. They are.
yes, while they are small, but that also means they achieve quite a lot in terms of humanity. They are helping their people.
But I must say, let's not kick Australia, because Australia is pretty good. Australia is pretty good.
Yeah.
I know people like
Could be better.
Huh?
Could be better.
But a very good skill. Very good skill.
We are very good already.
But could be better.
Yeah, it could be better. It always could be better. Now, according to him, the next revolution is he called urban revolution, starting to develop large cities. And he said it is caused by the development of the bronze methodology. So it's technology driven in practically. So he identified 10 characteristics for old cities. There are a larger settlements. That means the number of people there is more dense, more people per unit area. They have specialists. That means the division of labor. Different people do different things. Not everybody doing the same thing. And the surplus was collected together and given to a god or king. So we started to have ruling class. They witnesses monumental architecture. So a lot of people are getting together to build huge structure, the pyramids, for example. There was an unequal distribution of social service. So again, that go back to this king ruling class. Writing was invented, society, the science develops, the understanding of nature improves, naturalistic arts develop, there are different kinds of artwork starting to happen, trade with foreign areas increased, and the state organization was based on residence rather than kinship. I think the last one may not be true. It's still a lot of kinships which go into the state organization until the last maybe 200 or 300 years. Before that, most of the ruling class is family-based. So you have a king, a nobleman, and then the noble title is passed through bloodlines rather than by ability. So no matter whether you're better or not, but because you were born from a king or queen, then you become a prince, and then the prince will become king. So that is through bloodline. So that bloodline is kinship rather than a residence. If it is based on residence, you probably will have in that group of people select the best to continue. But until recently, it didn't happen that way. Recently, starting to a democracy, starting we have Chinese system, then we're starting to have another way of selecting leaders. Whether that way is good or not, we don't know, but at least we are trying. So I think the last one probably is a bit incorrect, but anyway, interesting to raise this idea as well. The negatives: increased social stratification in the classes and oppression of the majority by a power elites. So once you have class, then the upper class is always trying to extract more resources for themselves. Whether it's done by production means or by oppressing the lower classes in order to extract more power to themselves. It's quite a human character, especially for those rising to the top as the power elites. They are power hungry people. Otherwise, they won't rise up to the top of the power. As such, they will try to extract as much resources or value from surrounding, including natural and oppression of other people. Again, this is characterized by several methods. How it sustains its food supply, types of livelihood, settlements, forms, etc. So we look at it one by one. All civilization depends on agriculture, except an early civilization in Peru, where they depend on maritime resources. Most will depend on the land, because we are land-based animal. And grain farms can result in accumulated storage and a surplus of food. Because we can store grain for a relatively long time, and that will permit people to do things besides producing food. And therefore, we have division of labor. Once we have division labor, then the complexity increase, and then we will have specialized trade, soldiers, artists, priests, and other specialized career. So you must have food surplus in order to feed these other people. And then there will be an area where there will be a large concentration, which is the cities where you do work and trade. But the city itself, by definition, cannot support itself, must depends on the surrounding to provide the food, everything for the city. So there will be farmers relatively close to the city, but not within the city in order to continue provide the resources necessary to sustain the people within the city. More complex political structure. More complex also means it is more stratified. The ruling class concentrate in cities and usually will have much more control over surplus. And the ruling class starting not able to manage the ruling themselves, so they will start to have bureaucracy. So the classification of the system get into the 4 different categories. I'm running out of time, so probably 2 more slides. Okay, economy, much more complex. And before that, we have the gift economy, but it will eventually develop into trade economy. And therefore, we'll need a money system. And it is important to know that the complexity doesn't always mean an improvement of the living standard, although most will have a little bit of improvement anyway. Okay, a writing system and diverse cultural traits, and it will spread to other area. And I think I will stop here. Okay, I will stop here, and then we'll continue next week. Okay, thank you. Running out of time. So we'll continue next week. Okay, bye now.
Thank you.